Hello everyone, Richard here for more Panzer Corps Ultimate Mode information. This is going to be my third iteration trying Ultimate Mode. The inspiration for this is coming from the fact that Soren is playing on Manstein, and he's discovering new ideas and new techniques, and has built a roadmap for how to approach maps more aggressively. So we'll kind of get into that a little bit here. So let's review what we've learned that's new. You can see my prior videos on how to play Ultimate Mode for all the old stuff. And then from this, I'm going to have a different core. And then I have different approaches to some of the maps because of Soren's efforts. And the magnum opus of this is I found a way to relatively easily get a decisive on Spoils of War, but when I get to that, that will be much later. When I get a video on that, we'll talk about it. So from this, something that I think most people would have assumed was impossible is actually possible. That's why we have new insights. So what are the big ideas? What's new and different about how we should approach Ultimate Mode? So you should be hyper aggressive, but there's an interval over how hyper aggressive. I think Goose and Bricata have sometimes pushed the envelope to extreme amounts, but maybe dial it back some. But for the most part, you should be hyper aggressive within reason. And you're going to get more prestige, more experience, more kills, and so on by being that way, by playing that way. But you don't want to get too aggressive because the prestige cost of elite replacements gets pretty expensive. So you have to be careful. If you look at what Soren is doing on Manstein in 1940, he's rarely taking damage, and he's making a lot of the maps relatively easy. And I think that is a good approach, and I am fully expecting he's going to crush 1941. And then it'll get interesting in 1942, but that's a long time for me to slowly build up my core and try to catch up to him. So that's kind of what's inspired this, is I think that there's a lot better approaches to the maps, and he has really brought up all kinds of interesting things. Anyway, proceeding. So one of the things that's going to be different is gradually strengthening artillery and planes and AI. By gradually, this is in 1939, but basically by 1940, I'm pumping overstrength into them. Even now in 39, I end up doing that anyway, because I had extra prestige, because I played maps better, and I figured out how to not do elite replacement so often. So you need to overstrengthen things. Eventually, I think my entire core is going to get overstrengthened to mimic Soren's as much as possible, with a few tweaks here and there, because you need firepower. So I think one of the biggest problems Bricata, Goose, and I ran into when doing Ultimate Mode is not enough overstrength. It's tricky though, because prestige is not exactly abundant, but if you overstrength and take minimum damage, you're going to start running away with gains in prestige. So Soren is kind of showing you how to play at that level to get certain things. Level up. What is also different about my approach now is I'm going to level up my anti-tank more in 39. I'm going to keep this unit, and I'm going to keep it around, try to get it to 2 stars. I'm curious to see what Soren does with this Toad anti-tank. I think our anti-tank weapon is in the same place. Maybe mine's slightly ahead. I didn't get it to 2 stars in 39 because I prioritized other units. Also get 1 Panzerjäger and carefully level it up. So Soren is doing a really good job with that. I have a 1-star Panzerjäger in 1940. I don't see any reason why I can't continue to mimic his approach with the Panzerjäger, and I think I'll do very well with it, and I will probably save several thousand in prestige. So that's another thing that's super important. There is something he brought up at Calais that I'm hoping him or someone else will enlighten the audience about. He mentioned that if you destroy too many core slot units, then the enemy can buy reinforcements. And I want to know how he knows that, and I want to know how you can check in the map the map editor, how many core slots there are. Like, how did he know what the trigger for that was? Because he said that there were 10 core slots at Calais, and if you destroyed if you destroyed enough units that there was less than 10, then they could buy reinforcements. I want to know how he knew that and what unit counted as a core slot. This is potentially a really groundbreaking idea that could potentially make maps like Calais much easier. So I want to hear more details about that. The other thing that's not necessarily new, but it's going to get a super high focus, is the double Stuka strategy. And I don't think Prakata and Goose have been doing this in the early war years. But the double Stuka strategy is you hit something with a Stuka once, then the next turn you hit it again, and then you hit it with another Stuka after that. This is a very powerful strategy. You're going to need to use it a lot to take out problematic units. And this strongly suggests you need to buy a second Stuka as early as possible and really get working on it. I wasn't using double Stuka much in 39, but I think it's going to crop up and become more important in 40. And the reason you want to do this is it's a way to delete units from the map, especially particularly challenging units that are in the way. I think you're going to see this. The double Stuka strategy is basically creating a mini Rudel. So it's a less efficient way to Rudel something. And you don't have a Rudel until Minsk, so you better, you kind of have problems in 1940 without a double Stuka strategy. I think that problem gets fixed by kind of mimicking a Rudel. You can watch Soren's videos to see what I'm talking about. This is also really important, very difficult for me to do, because my memory is not as good as Soren's. You must memorize exact position and attacks on the most difficult maps. So one of the things I found that made playing 1939 a little bit easier is I have another screen showing Soren's moves and placement and his discussion of strategy, and I look at his map and I go, oh, these units go on these squares, and I know as I play through the video that this unit goes to this square. And it's copying him, but you have to understand that the exact specifications he picks are picked for a reason. It is extremely difficult to deviate from his specifications and not run into problems. It can often be a total disaster if you don't do exactly what he does. With that being said, I have to make modifications to his planning because my core is weaker. And I have 5 fewer turns, so I have to emphasize more brutal combat at times than he can. But Soren sets up excellent initial turns that are not necessarily perfect, but they're close, and it saves me a lot of time. So I highly recommend you look at his Man Scene playthrough, which is going to be universally applicable, except for some issues with Guderian and Ultimate. But it's really useful to look at it. So I'm going to take his ideas and I'm going to work around my limited XP, my limited overstrength to get through super hard maps. I had to do different shenanigans for Spoils of War to kind of get the gist of his plan in motion, and then it turned into chaos after that, because you have to do it if you're going for a decisive. But you'll see that that's a really special situation. More ideas. You, as a player in Ultimate Mode, are fighting a really complicated n-dimensional battle between XP, prestige, decisive victory versus marginal victory, and efficient spending of prestige. It's really, really delicate. I certainly didn't get it on the third time through. I don't think I really hit max efficiency, but I improved a lot. And I made some weird decisions that I normally wouldn't do. I de-emphasized the 88 and anti-tank play a bit, but I got 2 88s and an anti-tank and my Panzerjäger to 1 star, which is good. By de-emphasizing those units, I could bring other units, especially artillery and infantry, and focus on getting those guys up to speed as fast as possible. And I often was using regular replacements because I just didn't have the prestige in the early 39 to give them elite replacements. And I think starting from Oslo, I started giving elite replacements all the time because I had enough prestige built up. So that fight is really difficult to discuss. You just kind of have to watch Soren play, and maybe I'll bring up some points in my videos. So focus on carefully building up XP on hard units in 39 and 40, and I define hard units as units that can be difficult to get XP on. Anti-tank, anti-aircraft, infantry. Those first two war years are the most important for Ultimate Mode because your window of safety to build up XP is extremely small, and thanks to reduced turns, it's even worse than normal. So you got to get a whole bunch of units up to 2 stars, maybe pushing 3 by the end of 40, so that way you can kind of rampage through 41, which is your last opportunity to get your units ready. So I think Soren's doing a really good job with this, and I'm curious to see how he finishes 1940. I plan on following a somewhat similar path that he's doing. 6 artillery as soon as possible. I think Barkada, Goose, and I were a little delayed in getting artillery. You need to focus on getting artillery as fast as possible. There's just no way around it. You need to get that artillery experience. You need to get overstrength on that artillery. You just need to do it. That means you're going to be pretty aggressive in the first 2 scenarios in 39, and then try to grab as much prestige as you can in Lodz, and then a whole bunch will come into your lap at Piatek. And here's what's also different. You should have 8 artillery at Warsaw. So Soren used 8 artillery and it was extremely effective. I ran into problems because I didn't have an 8th artillery piece. I had 7, and it was a problem. So like that extra artillery piece makes a huge difference. And I had to bring 2 Stukas to help clean up, which is Soren's method, instead of bringing more level bombers. So I'm okay with it because level bombers get XP quickly. I wanted to get my Stukas to 2 stars for Spoils of War anyway. Next, you need 8 artillery for Spoils of War. Here's a big hint. If you want to manhandle Spoils of War, you gotta bring the guns, and a lot of them. And my guns were overstrengthened except for 1. It makes a huge difference. And 8 artillery in 1940. Artillery. Not even Goose was using this much artillery. I think everybody made a mistake by not bringing more artillery. It helps you control engagements, and Soren demonstrates this over and over and over again. More artillery. So those 3 bullet points, I'm hoping, drill down to your brain that you need artillery as fast as possible, as experience as fast as possible, and overstrength on them as fast as possible. It just needs to happen. I think everyone was undergunned for 1940, and it caused problems. This is something Soren does, but I think this idea is old. I don't see it talked about until Brakata and myself, and maybe Goose. Maybe even Robbie Play Strategy Games talked about this. Double artillery traps. You're going to be using these all the time. I use them in creative ways. I like to use them with AA guns. You'll see an example of that at Narvik. But you need to set up double artillery traps as much as possible. It makes a huge difference, especially in Ultimate Mode. You got to go fast. You got to give the enemy tempting targets, pull infantry out of the trenches, and into combat as much as possible. So this is going to get emphasized a lot more, or as much as possible, in this attempt. Anti-tank in bad positions are a good way to trick the AI. Anti-aircraft, especially with inexperienced AA, it's an excellent way to trick the AI. The other big idea is you have to memorize fighter traps to reduce the burden in the early air war. So I sucked at this pretty much all the way through my entire playthrough, but now I have Soren to lead the way. You just memorize the fighter traps he sets, and you should be able to do that most of the time. So you need to do this to make the air war be faster and more efficient and less of a burden on the player. Too many things can go wrong if you allow the AI to cause chaos with the airplanes. That's why we're going to get into core composition and why I still think we need 4 anti-aircraft guns. So my updated core, 14 infantry. I don't remember what I had last time. 12 maybe? 2 Paris, 6 Hero, 2 SE Grenadier, 4 regular. I don't know if that's going to stay regular. I haven't made up my mind. Probably not. I'm probably going to have some Grenadiers. And I don't think the paratroopers are necessarily going to stay paratroopers, but this is just my initial thoughts. So what's really different is I'm including 2 SE infantry. I think that when you get into the Stalingrad maps, you're going to miss not having these units. They're going to be super OP at that point. They're going to be 4 stars with 2 heroes and probably 4 points of overstrength, which doesn't count against the soft cap. And those guys are mini Oladiers. So it's going to be like having 3 Oladiers at Stalingrad. It's going to make a big difference. So that's a big change. Tanks is lower. I think a lot of people would recommend 12, but I'm going to go with 6. 6 SE, 3 Hero, and I'm going to keep one of the original tanks given to me and sell the other one. I think we need to de-emphasize armor because tanks are getting a lot more combat by 42. It's infantry that's a problem, so you need to de-emphasize armor early and get working on the infantry as fast as possible. Next, 4 level bombers. So that's even more than the 3 that I think Goose and Bricata and I were using. I think we need 4 level bombers, dump the Junker, just because endgame Junker isn't as good as the Donier or the Heinkel. We're going to get 4. I talked to Soren about this. He tends to agree the level bombers are a little underappreciated. Certainly by 43, or maybe even starting at Stalingrad, having a bunch of level bombers is going to be really helpful. I mean, if you think about it, you don't need that much armor at Stalingrad. Yeah, I don't know. You might have, let's see, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to guess you're going to have 5 tanks and a couple of anti-tanks. And then that's it for armor. It's probably enough. You may not even need 7 tanks. And in place of like armor, you could just bring level bombers. And level bombers will give you extra suppression that you need to try to bulldoze your way through Stalingrad. But later in 43, it's not Stalingrad I'm so focused on, but later in 43, you get these big heavy-hitting tanks, especially after Kursk. Everything gets messy. Level bombers, if you watch my end of 43 Grand Campaign Ultimate Mode, level bombers bailed me out over and over and over again. I need more of them. And I need to get rid of the Junker because it's not as effective as the Donier and Heinkel. So that's a big change. 4 tactical bombers. This is 1 more than my last time. So the 2 Stuka strategy, then we get Lent. So we're gonna have a double 2 Stuka strategy once we get Brutal. So that's gonna make a big difference. It's gonna make maps slightly easier, and when every little edge matters, you're gonna appreciate it. 8 fighters, that's not different. 2 anti-tanks, this is different. Most people would recommend 3. I think that the prestige problem and the experience problem is serious enough that 2 anti-tanks is the most you should bring. Soren has excellent statistical analysis on the performance of the anti-tank, and I don't think the anti-tank upholds that well. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have them, but I think 2 is the absolute most you should have. And I often find there's a lot of maps where 2 is good and 3 is too much, if that makes sense. And this is also going to make room in your core for bringing a tank along or something else. And I only have to babysit 2 anti-tanks. I think it's going to save thousands in prestige. And maybe more than that, because there's a way to safely level them in 1940, I suspect. 1 scout. This is a big change. Some people say 3 scouts, some people say 2. If you look at the scout performance on the statistics from Soren, the scouts are not holding up well. Especially if you're doing something like Manstein or Ultimate Mode, 1 scout is fine. There's lots of ways to use that scout to cause problems. 2 scouts is weakened the core too much. So that's a big change, but it also reduces the burden on the player. I'm not dumping thousands of prestige into the 2nd scout. to keep it alive. So I'll be saving prestige that way as well. The next thing is actually that should be 4 AA. I was toying with this, but I think that we're going to need 4 AA. Because if you look at 1943, it's total chaos in the air, and you're going to need as much support as possible on the ground. Do I have the wrong addition here? 24, 28, 32, 40, 42, 43, 46. No, this is right. So that would mean 13 artillery. I think we're going to end up with 13 artillery, not 14 artillery. So a lot of artillery. So I think Robbie Play Strategy Games has 12 as his recommendation. I think Soren does as well. But I think I'm going to bring another artillery piece because it's clear I need more. I already have 8 of those 13. So if we look at how it compares to the old composition, 1 more tactical bomber, 1 more strategic bomber, 1 less scout, 1 less anti-tank, 2 less SE tanks, 2 more SE infantry, 2 more artillery, 1 less in AA. Actually, 1 more in artillery. I forgot to update this. 1 more artillery and no changes to the AA. I mentioned that maybe with super careful planning you can get away with 1 less AA to bring more artillery, but I'm curious to see what Soren says. Does he think that we can survive 43 or 44 with 3 AA compared to 4? I don't know. Because that would be what I would do, is if I get rid of one of my AA guns, then I will buy another artillery piece. So that's what I'm waiting to hear back from him. So that's the update on the core, and that's the end of the presentation. The next video will be Poznan. Until next time, Richard out.